this is... I want to talk about this guy just because any excuse to talk about this guy, I'm going to take it. Because I find him one of the most interesting, fascinating people in all of sports and a sports world. Oh, there are plenty of people that have opinions. There are plenty of people that rant. There's no one that has ranted like him and has been completely untouchable. The San Antonio Spurs, they're awful now. We get that. But not all that long ago, the San Antonio Spurs were the New England Patriots of the NBA. I think that's a fair comparison. I feel perfectly comfortable. In fact, I think they were a better version of the New England Patriots of the NBA. The Patriots with Tom Brady, the Patriots on that great long run that they had, the Spurs were the exact same thing. It's just nobody noticed because it's San Antonio. They were dominant, or among the most dominant, from 2003 to 2016. There were championships in there. There were conference championships in there. There was star power in there, and the world didn't really pay much attention outside of the state of Texas. Not only did the Spurs have an incredible run, they were, and frankly still are, but one of the two best run franchises in all of sports. And I can make a pretty decent argument they are the best run franchise in all of sports. In other words, they get it right. There's not a ton of drama. Well, except for one person. But there's not a ton of drama. Those days, the days of Dennis Rodman being there just for drama's sake are past. They manage their money well, and they win. And they've done it under the radar. So it's not difficult to make an argument that the San Antonio Spurs have been the best run franchise in all of sports since the early 2000s. They're not getting the recognition. They're now getting the recognition, I should say, for their great run. They are. And it's coming in interesting ways, but they deserve it. So first, the recognition the Spurs organization are getting for those great runs, and then a chance to talk about the most outspoken person, seemingly you would think the most controversial person, but certainly the most outspoken person in sports of the past 35 years. And if you've got another one, I welcome the challenge. I'll bet you there's not. I don't think anybody's even been close for the past 35 years. So the story is this. The boring part of this is right up front, and that is the 2023 Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame class. This would be the NBA Hall of Fame class. The class consists of Dwayne Wade. No one's going to argue with the names here. These were all superstars and dominant players. Dwayne Wade, Dirk Nowitzki, Paul Gasol, Tony Parker, Becky Harmon, and Gregg Popovich. Now, you've got 3 Spurs on that list just this year alone. And that's because of the great run from 2003 to 2016. So let's see, Parker by himself, the Spurs were so genius in terms of putting a team together. I'm pretty certain you don't have very many French players on your list of NBA stars. That's Tony Parker. The Spurs, I'm not going to say they invented it, but they certainly were ahead of the curve of international players. They just kept finding these perfect pieces and used them in the perfect ways and then managed their money incredibly well. Oh, and their coach was the best the game has known. But, okay, so there's Tony Parker. Let's see, that would be 4 championships, 2007 NBA Finals MVP. Tony Parker was All-NBA 4 times. He was a 6-time All-Star, blah, 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 blah. A superstar. A quiet superstar. How about Gregg Popovich? No coach in NBA history has more regular season wins than Gregg Popovich. That's 1,363. Don't worry, we're going to get to the interesting part. More than 1,300 wins. Let's see. The guy has, 5 championships, 6 Western Conference titles. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer of Hall of Famers. And still coaching. Oh, and he's a wine connoisseur, but that doesn't matter. Then there's Becky Harmon, who's a fascinating story by herself. Again, the genius of Gregg Popovich, gets Becky Harmon to this point. She's the first woman to ever be a head coach in an NBA regular season game. That happened back in 2020. It happened, I would say intentionally, because Gregg Popovich got thrown out of a game. And so then she took over. She's the head coach in the WNBA of the Las Vegas Aces. I think she was a 6-time All-Star herself. Okay, there's all that. I don't think there's any arguing the sports part of the Spurs nor Gregg Popovich. They just, he's basketball's Bill Belichick. And seemingly as crabby, but in a different kind of way. Far more likable, far more tolerable, and I think more successful. Particularly given where he was in San Antonio with the franchise that he had that was his nondescript. I mean, you find nondescript sports franchises, and unfortunately 2 of them are in Texans, the Texans and the Spurs. But they were even nondescript when they're making those great runs. But Gregg Popovich, he is one of the most interesting people in sports, and he might be the most interesting. Just in terms of background and the way he carries himself, but most importantly because the man goes on absolute rants. I mean, any moment, any day, any news conference. And he does them, okay? This is not Gregg Popovich sitting in his house with a camera and a podcast. He'll be sitting in front of an NBA logo and go off on a rant. He'll be sitting at the practice floor and go off on a rant. He'll be in the Spurs front office and go off on a rant. You interview him at halftime, he's going to go off on a rant and get it just about right every time. He has been the most outspoken person in sports for decades. Now, let that sink in. I know it sounds kind of dramatic, like a hot take or something, but I am working right now to think of anyone that's even close to Gregg Popovich in terms of being outspoken. I don't care if you agree with him or not. I'm saying, I would argue, I don't know many people as outspoken who actually speak in complete sentences with real thoughts. He's really that smart. But even if he wasn't that smart, no one is more outspoken. No one. In fact, the most interesting thing about Gregg Popovich, not just the success, and you can just go on and on and on about his success as a coach. There's no denying that. I mean, he's on that short list of the past 50 years of the best coaches the game or any sport has known. Then there's the other side. It's just epic. I don't know. I'm trying to think if anyone in the past 35 years, if you made a short list of outspoken people in the sports industry, Howard Cosell kind of would have been that, but I don't know that Howard Cosell even ventured off in the areas that Gregg Popovich does. For those under the age of 40, Howard Cosell was, at various times, one of the most hated people in all of America. He was irritating, but in a brilliant kind of way. He was a broadcaster for ABC. I don't know who else it would be. There have been plenty of superstars. There have been plenty of superstars that say stuff, but I don't think anybody in the ballpark of Gregg Popovich. Nobody has gone where Gregg Popovich has gone. He has been fearless in his rants. What stands out the most, okay? And I remember the first time, I think I was sitting down the hall where Billy Joe, Freddie Joe, Millie Sue from Lano were calling me to tell me I suck and you're a jackass and all this stuff. I'm amazed he's untouchable. That's the thing about Gregg Popovich. He's untouchable. Now, I've maintained for many years, and people hate to hear this, but I'd like to hear you argue otherwise. He's untouchable because he's old and he's white. He's got a military background. Think about this for a second. And I'll play some of the things that he said through the years. And I mean, this is just a tip of the iceberg. I mean, you could do a Gregg Popovich epic rant, talk show worthy rant every day. I mean, it's an entire reel of just rants, epic rants, where there is no stopping him. Think about this. Imagine the reaction, the Fox News reaction, if it were LeBron James. If it were a black athlete, they would be absolutely ridiculed publicly. They would be chum in the water in the talk show world. They would be told to shut up, You don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. I mean, LeBron James is one of the nicest public figures you're going to get. I mean, the guy's about as, he's about as boring as you can get. He tries to just ride this fence of sort of, I'm the nice guy kind of thing. And he is. He is not Gregg Popovich. I don't know anyone in sports who is as pointed and as direct and as critical and thought out and fearless as Gregg Popovich. LeBron James is, I'll keep it in the middle. I'll try to be nice. Now, talk radio hates him. Fox News hates him. They don't hate on Gregg Popovich. In all the years that Gregg Popovich has gone on the rants that he goes on, and he's doing it in Texas, and he's doing it with a boss who donates to Republicans, one of the biggest donors. He has been untouchable. I don't know how many different times through the years I challenged the audience even. This is a talk radio audience. This is, Freddie from Lano audience. And I said, how come you don't rip him? How come he's untouchable? Why is this that he is untouchable? He says stuff I'm not even sure I would say a lot of it. But okay. I don't even know who you're talking about, Jeff. I know you don't.
The fact that I believe with all my heart that Trump enjoyed it. And they talked about the police and how easy it was and the barriers were pulled and they just walked right in. That doesn't happen unless there's a wink and a nod somewhere. That just doesn't happen. It's never happened at any protest anybody's ever been to. This was a wink and a nod. Somebody had to realize that this was allowed, that this was, and that's where the lack of preparation comes too. There wasn't any preparation. He didn't want any preparation. He's incapable. He's incompetent. While that was going on, 4,000 of our other citizens died due to the pandemic yesterday. We still have the cyber attack that was way worse than Pearl Harbor that hasn't been talked about by him. He doesn't care. He loved those people hitting the Capitol because that's what he cares about. There's nothing, he's incapable of caring. And it's in one way, it's sad because he's a deranged, really flawed individual, but he's also dangerous. And that's why I don't think it's so far-fetched for people to start talking about the 25th Amendment. We know it probably won't happen. Mike Pence isn't going to do it. He's been an obsequious man for 4 years. He's not going to do it. I think he tried to take credit because he didn't try to overturn everything in the Congress last night. Well, he can't. He doesn't have the power to.
Yeah, what he said. Well, who's that, Jeff? That's a basketball coach. That's who that is. He's a basketball coach standing in front of an NBA logo. That's not some host on MSNBC. That's not Jeff Ward. That's the basketball coach of the San Antonio Spurs. And that's nothing. That's nothing. That's daily. That's hourly for him. And they all sound like that. Is anybody really going to debate it? I mean, come on. It's not. I know it's easy. It's low-hanging fruit. Trump's a doofus and he is deranged. I got it. I don't think that's that debatable. I'm just saying in the moment, this is post January 6th. The basketball coach who probably most people asked him about, how's your point guard's hamstring? Or, what about you blew that 8-point lead? Instead, he just goes there. You don't even have to prompt him. That's what he does. He'll walk in and go and go and go. I'll back up again. You tell me someone that has been that successful and that high profile, I promise you, if that were Michael Jordan, Fox News would catch on fire. No one says anything about Gregg Popovich. I don't know of anyone, any day, any time that is dare to say anything about Gregg Popovich. And I'm telling you, I know why. I knew it then. I knew it years ago. I know it now. He's an old white guy with a military background. That's why. He's untouchable. Now, he's good at it, so everyone's afraid of him. I mean, but no. If a black athlete went there, and they do try to go there. Again, it's not difficult to call Donald Trump deranged, okay? I get it. That's not a genius take. But You don't survive it publicly without getting absolutely ripped, unless your name is Gregg Popovich. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a one-off. No, it's not. That is hourly, man. I'm sure he's going off today about that shooting. I almost guarantee you he is. And he's a dude with a military background. Let's see. What is it? You want another highlight? Oh, yeah, here he goes. I have no idea why, just because. Here he talks about corrupt politicians.
I might be too cynical, or
good for you.
Maybe I'm just realistic, but
yes,
it sort of felt like a lot of politicians acquiesced to Juneteenth, and then basically either blatantly or between the lines said, "Now shut up. You got that, be happy. What else do you want?" Justice, equality, and recognition that we have a systemic system that keeps black and brown people in the background and underneath and less than. It was that kind of an attitude, like that really is depressing and angering both at the same time.
You know how I know there's not canceled culture? Him. Unless, and he might come away with this take too, and I'll bet, you know what, I bet at some point he's even said it. I'd like to talk to him and get him to say, I'd like to talk to him about wine, because I understand he's a wine connoisseur, but I bet he might even say, well, you know what, Jeff, why I don't get canceled? I'm an old white guy with a military background. Oh, and I win a lot too. I mean, let's don't dismiss that. I get it. You know, he is so, there are times through the years, and I'm telling you, I mean, a lot of people know this already. And I wouldn't blame, and I've said this a number of times, I wouldn't blame fans for saying, oh my gosh, okay already, we got it. I don't know that I would blame them. I've even said, I think at one point, that if I were his boss, and remember, his boss, Peter Holt, is one of, if not the biggest Republican donor in this state, and that's saying a lot. I've even said, I don't know that I would blame his boss for saying, Coach, okay, enough already, man. I mean, do you have to do this? He does it every day. I'm afraid he's going to get a podcast. It's like, please don't. But I've even said, I don't know that I would fault his boss for saying, oh, come on, man. I mean, we got it. I get it. Trump's a doofus. We understand that. His boss wouldn't say that. But I wouldn't hold it against his boss for saying, I really would like you to just lay off the politics and the social commentary. And then I think Gregg Popovich, I'm not sure he would say blank you, but I bet you he'd say, oh, yeah, blank you. And he'd walk right out in front of that NBA logo and go off. And he's untouchable. If it were a player, no athlete today, in terms of cancel culture, and this is the sort of bigger debate for all of us, which I think is pretty interesting. I don't know of an athlete, or certainly a younger person, and certainly a person of color, that could be as outspoken and critical as often in the most impromptu times you can think of and be able to survive it publicly. I'm serious. Imagine the reaction. I don't know that I can promise you cancel. I bet you if he was an athlete, they would be canceled. I bet you they would. If this were a Dallas Cowboys player, if Dak Prescott did that every day, I'm not sure he'd be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Yep, I went there. I mean, a lot of people don't want him that anyway, but I know he doesn't go there because he's like most athletes are. They don't want to be part of this stuff. They don't want to be outspoken. A lot of people are critical of athletes that are outspoken, and there's not that many that do it. And I don't fault them for saying, hey, look, I just want to play and make my money. I get that. That's fine. I respect it. So I don't know anybody that's in the ballpark of Gregg Popovich. I can't think of anyone. Now, you want to say Muhammad Ali, but that's certainly longer than 35 years ago. And there's no doubt that he was the most outspoken and impactful athlete probably of all time. And I said outspoken. I didn't say, Jackie Robinson may have had more impact than Muhammad Ali. But Ali is by far the most outspoken. Well, I don't know how far down the list Gregg Popovich is. And no one feels it. Like, you don't get that venom for Gregg Popovich that you do for everyone else. The Fox News world doesn't chew him up ever. Ever. I have no idea what talk radio is like in San Antonio, but I'll bet you on any given day, if LeBron James were to pop off and say something, and he has, or even tweet, I'll bet you he is chumming the water on talk radio. Gregg Popovich is crickets in reactions. What is this one here? I mean, I could do I don't want to do them all because I feel like I'm going to steal his material, especially about Trump. Let's see. Here he is on, sounds like a Jeff rant here. Fear-mongering.
Obviously, race is the elephant in the room, and we all understand that. But unless it is talked about constantly, it's not going to get better. People get bored. Oh, is it that again? They pull in a race card again. Why do we have to talk about that? Well, because it's uncomfortable. And there has to be an uncomfortable element in the discourse for anything to change. Whether it's the LGBT movement or, women's suffrage, race, it doesn't matter. People have to be made to feel uncomfortable, and especially white people, because we're comfortable. It's like you're at the 50-meter mark in a 100-meter dash. And you got that kind of a lead. Yes, because you were born white, you have advantages that are systemically, culturally, psychologically there. And they have been built up and cemented for hundreds of years. People want to hold their position. People want the status quo. People don't want to give that up. And until it's given up, it's not going to be fixed. I think that we do live in a difficult time, and it doesn't do a whole lot of good. We all know the situation, and it gets beaten up every day by talking heads, and it starts to get personal, and I think we all know why. We all know where the source is, where a lot of the division comes from. But to dwell on that sometimes I think is the wrong way to go. Because it's so obvious now. It's boring. The childishness and the gratuitous fear-mongering and race baiting has been so consistent that it's almost expected.
Okay, here's the thing about him that I'm not sure everybody knows, again, because they're so under the radar. I mean, remember, if the guy never said a word, he's on a short list of the best modern-day coaches in any sport. Got it? I mean, he's up there with Bill Belichick. Who knows what Bill Belichick says because he's a troll and he just grunts at people. But Gregg Popovich is about as articulate as you can get. The thing is, these rants, here's what's amazing about him. These rants, his team, he may just be off the floor. He may have just come off the floor and they won by 22 points. And guess what he does? That.